Welcome to the podcast, Whiskey and a Map. Stories of adventure and expeditions as told by those who live them. I'm your host, Michael Reinhardt. It has been said that many adventures and expeditions start simply with a map and a glass of whiskey. A desire to go and see the world's wild places. You're invited to pull up a chair, pour yourself a glass of your favorite whiskey, and join us as we hear stories from another one of our friends just returned from the field. We'd like to welcome to the podcast Jennifer Thomson. Jennifer, how are you doing?
I am good, thank you so much. I know it's a very large time zone, so thank you.
No, my pleasure. You are at the beginning of your career as an explorer scientist. You aspire to be what you frame as, or what you call, an ocean astronaut. However, before we get into that intriguing title, as is the tradition here, do you have a good drinking story for us?
I knew that you were going to ask me this because you ask most people on this podcast, and I'm afraid I don't really drink. I mean, I have a few drinks a year, but I suppose in a similar frame, I have a beverage story for you. So,
let's hear it.
Yeah, definitely. So last year, I was on a research vessel called OceanX, and there were many facets to this expedition that we were doing. And at one point, each of us scientists had to take shifts in an ROV mission control room. So remotely operated vehicle that goes down and explores the ocean bed. And we split this particular shift into 4 or 5 hours at a time. And I actually really loved the ROV mission control because to me, there were so many cameras and different angles. And, you know, we had the mappers in there as well. So they had their, multicolored bathymetry maps all around. And to me, it looked like the mission control room in NASA, so many screens and so much information going on all at once. And I was in charge of telling the pilots where to go, if there were any cool samples. And on this particular day, I hadn't been in the room for a while because I was also helping out with different aspects of the logistics of this expedition. So I went in, and as customary, before a long shift, we all did a tea round. So there were quite a few Brits on board, so we all had our favourite teas, and I was collecting the tea orders for that day and was about to go into the crew mess to make all the drinks for everyone before we started the shift. And it was at that exact moment when my friend, who was a heli pilot on board, came running up to me going, Jen, there's baby whales, you have to come. And this was crazy because we didn't expect to find what were bride's whales in this area, and in particular a mother and calf, because this has never been seen before. And I was very reluctant to go. Well, I really wanted to go on the helicopter because I was also part of the megafauna team, so I knew kind of what to look for. But I promised everyone that I would make tea. But he asked again, and I thought, yeah, screw it. So I left everyone, didn't really tell everyone where I was going, and I think in about 10 minutes we assembled a team, a media team and a few other megafauna scientists, and ran to the heli deck. The blades were still whirring, it was that fresh, and got on our gear and climbed in and spent the next hour searching for the mother and calf whale, which we did find, though everyone's tea got very cold and I didn't tell everyone that I was leaving.
But you had a great story when you came back.
I did, and everyone was very jealous of the pictures. I think at one point we were about 20 meters above them, hovering, and the mother was about 14, 15 meters, I would say, and the pictures were good. Let's just say that. The pictures were very good.
And where were you when this happened?
So we were in a place called the Farasan Banks, which honestly looks like the Maldives, but it's actually about 200 kilometers away from the Yemen border in the Saudi Arabian part of the Red Sea. So for me, going over there, it was very beautiful and a place where not many people have been this far, and it was actually gorgeous. So when we were doing these helicopter transects, you would look out of the we would look out the window, which wasn't there. We were, the sides of the heli were open, so we were getting buffeted by the wind the entire time. So if you managed to look out for long enough, you would see these beautiful coral reefs and all these islands, and the colours of the water were just magical, and you can just see as far as the horizon. So it was a very beautiful place.
What a great experience.
Definitely.
Ocean astronaut. What is that? What do you envision becoming an ocean astronaut?
It's funny. It is as far as my knowledge, a term I have kind of coined myself. It's a word that I use to articulate my passions in both diving and science, in both the marine terms and also the space terms. But I suppose it's a term that encapsulates my desire for exploration. So I am very far off becoming this yet, but I want to somehow create a niche for myself where I am conducting not only dives in terms of scientific exploration dives, but also working on expedition vessels and doing deep sea and extreme research in space sciences. And because of the fact that the deep oceans are sometimes as far removed as the moon or the the realms of space, that can we combine these two disciplines and maybe create facilities or disciplines where we can use different technologies and research which can relate to both aspects of deep sea and space, and create new technologies and help out each other and create new possibilities. So that's what I like to call myself. So I'm finding a niche, and hopefully we're getting along there.
And does this have to do with the search for life on other planetary bodies and out in space?
It can be. I would love to envision somehow helping actually astronauts, for example, go to Mars. I remember actually getting into this because I always look for solutions in nature and what nature can provide, and, using the fact that we can take from nature inspiration in terms of R&D development, healthcare, and, general, even artistic inspiration as a facet of the conservation use of these environment. So yeah, I remember in my second year of university, I was studying zoology at the time, and we had a list of topics, and we had to write a thesis about one of these topics. And I asked if I could just completely make my own topic up. And they said yes, and I think they didn't know what I was about to write. So I looked at the hibernation mechanisms of Arctic ground squirrels and brown bears. And I thought, well, can't we use these to maybe make some sort of therapeutic hypothermia for use for astronauts to go on space flights when they, have to hibernate or be at rest for really long periods, for example, Mars missions. So even back then, a few years ago, I was always looking for the solutions that nature can provide for technological advances, be it, deep sea or extreme environments, or even helping humans get to other planets to explore them. Maybe that's making me want to be some sort of astronaut and do that as well. But that was the interest, the intersection between the environment and what it can do to help exploration as well.
Do you recall what first set you off on this path to be explorer scientist?
That's a really good question. Yes, I do. I remember actually the exact moment. So it was my third year of undergrad university, actually, yes. And it was at this time, so I was making my own degree, if you like. So I studied zoology, but then I also learned a bit of Mandarin and sign language. And the plan was to go to China, because my favorite animal is a panda. And many people think, why not a whale or a whale shark or any type of marine creature? It's a panda. I'd love them. And I was always meant to go to China, and I had a dream to research megafauna in Asia. But life happened, and I actually ended up setting up my own research station in Namaqualand, so just off the border between Namibia and South Africa. And I was looking at small mammals and how they cope with extreme environments. So every day I was going out and taking these blood samples and radio tracking these like really fluffy, cute rats, which were like balls of fluff. And it was really good, but it was very, very desolate. And even at some points, at the research station there, I spoke to maybe 2 people for the entire month. And it was so desolate, but so beautiful. And I fell in love with... every night, we had to check where these colonies of small mammals were. So there were 1 or 2 that were radio collared, and I would go out holding up a big antenna and trekking off into the night, sometimes wearing many layers because the desert was so cold. And on one night, I realised that for the past month, I was getting not stressed, but I kept having these feelings of anxiousness. And there was something in my soul which wasn't quite satisfied with what I was doing. And it was at the time that every time I finished collecting the data and I ascertained where these colonies of mammals were, I would go and just lie in the sand and look up at the night sky. And the stars were so beautiful. I have never seen anything like them. Just the constellations. Sometimes you didn't need a head torch, and the stars were that bright and that many, and sometimes there were thunderstorms going on over the valley. It hardly rained, but when it did, it poured. And the whole sky would light up, and it was so beautiful. And I remember one time I was lying there looking up at the stars, trying to work out the constellations. And I thought to myself, I know I'm missing. I am missing the exploration of the unknown and the unreachable, and that is what will satisfy me. And in that moment, looking up at the stars, I thought, is there some way I can go up there or help some other people go up there as well? And what came to mind is the fact that I was not a physicist at that time, so what is the next best medium to do that? The ocean, because it is that we can't survive there very well. And there are lots of deep sea exploration things happening, which kind of go in parallel with space sciences. And I thought, okay, I need to learn how to scuba dive. And within 2 months, I left and I learned how to scuba dive. And I suppose the rest is history. So we went off, and we're now on this journey of amalgamating science and diving and putting them together and somehow trying to get into the space science realm as well.
Well, you say the rest is history. I believe within a year of deciding to become a diver, you earned your dive master qualifications.
I did actually, yes. That was in my 4th year of university. We did a lot during undergrad, which was quite good because my master's COVID hit, and incidentally, I was meant to go, for my master's degree, I was meant to go to Antarctica, and that was all cancelled the day before my research project was, we were about to go on a flight, and 1,000 days later, we did actually make it, but that was another story. But yes, I did that in Mozambique, and incidentally, that time was also pivotal because there was a dive, about my 50th dive, I think, and it was on that dive that I first set on the path of learning about the agency which I'm involved in today, called Global Underwater Explorers, which are a diving agency, but they're a lot more involved in conservation and exploration, in particular caves and wrecks and conservation. So it was on this dive in Mozambique, and I remember this dive well because we had just come back from a failed seahorse surveying attempt. So we packed up all our gear, and at 4 a.m. we travelled right the way across the country again, and we got back to our research station. So I was doing my dive masters in a very remote area of Mozambique called Zavra. I wasn't in any dive shop, so it was me supervising the scientists as they search for nudibranchs and things like that. And on this particular dive, I was supervising my friend conduct benthic monitoring surveys, so quadrats, and we photograph them, and we then analyse it later to see the type of topography or how much coral is there or how much algae is there on this particular spot. And it was in this spot we were coming up for our safety stop, and I wasn't really paying I wasn't really paying attention because I had the quad rats around my neck, and I was like trying not to let them fall apart because they were, let's say they were quite old. So I was taping back up the quad rat and putting it around my neck as a necklace, trying to fix these as we were coming up. And my friend was suddenly screamed into her reg and shooted off into the distance. And we actually saw a humpback whale, and I almost missed it because it was so close to us. It appeared like the entire ocean shifted in front of our eyes. So all that was going on. So I came away from that dive wanting to know more about how to conduct scientific surveys very well when you don't end up with fixing a quad rat around your neck, and also wanting to go back to cool places where you see whales on safety stops. So that kind of led me to finding an agency called Global Underwater Explorers. For me, diving is a form of meditation. I'm not sure where you learned, actually. That's a very cool story. I would love to know where you actually learned to dive, because I learned to dive in Thailand, so it was beautiful. But even if I'm diving, in areas where there is no visibility and no fish or any life, as it were, or there's no megafauna, I love every dive, because to me, every dive is a form of meditation. And I use it to sort my feelings, and I'm breathing, and it feels like you're very present in the moment, which my mind going everywhere really needs that. Apart from when you're learning new skills. So yeah, when you're diving for fun.
Well, that's the best, is where you are calm, and it does seem natural. Yes, where I learned to dive, it's off the coast of California, where the water is very cold. I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau documentaries. So in California, you can't get certified until you were the age 13. So about 3 or 4 months before my 13th birthday, after an egg, my parents, they put me through a dive school, and it was run by an old, to me, he was this tough ex-Navy diver, and his training was pretty significant. You had to pass all these physical requirements. We'd be in the pool, and he'd sneak up behind you and turn your regulator off and see how you would react. His whole idea was trying to teach you to be calm in the water and not panic when something went wrong, as it happens. And our checkout dive is actually pretty brilliant, because he wanted to make sure that nobody would panic and that you're comfortable in the water no matter what. So I'm this scrawny little 13-year-old kid on our checkout dive. The tanks probably weigh as much as I do. I'm sitting there lugging everything out. And we go into the water. It was maybe 50 degrees. And I know that because he showed me on his thermometer on his watch. And so we go down into the kelp beds, and the water's cold, but you got about maybe 20, 30 feet of visibility through the kelp. And it's a nice dive. We're supposed to follow him in the checkout dive. And then all of a sudden he stops, tells us we got to take our mask off. So down about 30, 40 feet, 50-degree water, we have to take our mask off.
Ooh.
And that cold water just hits you. And so that was the first test. Okay, is that going to freak you out so that you're going to jump to the surface and do bad things? Well, I didn't. I took it off, and I'm breathing. And then with our mask off, he required us to follow him through the kelp bed.
Wow.
And you don't have a mask on. You're looking in seawater, 50-degree water. And so we're doing the thing. We're going all the way through. And, at the end, we put our mask on. He had knocked off some scallops. So we go back into shore. And we're getting our gear off. And it was a great moment. He kind of nods to me and has me come over with him. And then he's just at a sink we're cleaning off. He opens up the scallops, right? And he's not really saying much. And then he looks over at me and says, I really didn't think you were going to make it. And then he hands me one of these scallops, these raw scallops, to eat right there. So it was kind of his, I don't know, maybe some Navy rite of passage. But, it's one of those memories that this skinny 13-year-old will always remember after that checkout dive.
That's amazing. I mean, wow. Californian kelp forests, that is on my dive bucket list. Though I So actually, just yesterday, I learned how to dive in a dry suit. So maybe very soon I can come and we can maybe dive together, because that would be amazing. Having forests and underwater is the perfect combination.
That's the best way to describe the California kelp beds. They are underwater forests, and you'll have these kelps, plants that go 30, 40, 50 feet. They're like redwoods under the water. And just like a forest, you have all these animals that congregate in there. And then, of course, the other animals that like to eat those animals that kind of circle around. But
oh, definitely. That's what I would love to see, actually, the really giant macrocystis.
In your training, I understand that you're learning how to cave dive. Can you tell us about that?
That's actually a very serendipitous segue. There is this shark conservationist and cave diver and explorer who I greatly admired from afar for a long time, and her name was Christina Zanato. And it was during COVID, and I remember having all my plans for that year cancelled because I was meant to go to Antarctica to do some research on microplastics. I got the permit, we got everything. It was March the 17th, and March the 17th, 2020, and of course COVID in March 2020 was sadly making a devastating impact on the world. So everything was cancelled, and I escaped back across the border from Scotland, where I was studying at the time, doing my master's, and came back to the UK. And I was doing a lot of outreach work on social media, trying to advocate scientists to learn how to dive and gain new skills. And I just thought I would DM Christina Zanato, because why not? So I did that, and one thing led to another, and I went to visit her, and I went to dive with sharks, and I got invited into her world, which was amazing, and it was such a privilege and a pin to me moment to spend time with such an amazing, unstoppable woman, especially a woman in the time when women were not present in diving that much. And so it was amazing to see such a strong personality in a person who has, again, carved out her own niche, as it were. Living on the Bahamas, she carved out her niche in making a living through shark conservation and cave exploration as well. And she liked me, which was nice. And she invited me back, and we did a side mount course together and a very small introduction into cavern and then cave training. And it was amazing. It showed me how far I'd come and how far I have yet to come, as it were. So there was one dive, and it was a place called Owl's Hole, I think it was, because it was in the middle of nowhere, and we would load up the van, her truck rather, and go out into this desolate land, and it was very, very hot, but we would carry one tank. Well, she was very strong, so she would lift up the tank on her shoulder and sprint off and clambering all these boulders, and I was struggling in the back, tripping over everything because I can't see at the best of times. And we got to the dive site, and the dive site was this massive cavern, this massive hole in the ground, rather. And we would look down, and there was this ladder about 20 metres plunging into this pool of water. And the colours were beautiful. And she'd hidden a rope, actually, on the fringes of this big hole, as it were. So we would carry all the tanks, each tank back and forth. And when we got there, she would tie this rope around the tanks and lower it down all the way. And then she would do that for every single tank. And again, tie it off at the bottom and keep going back and forth up and down the ladder. And the other one was lowering it down. And then we would gear up again, go back, and with our fins and everything, we would climb down the ladder with great caution as well. I mean, we would fall into the water if we fell, but it was a long way down. And then we got there, we would gear up. She was amazing. She was so still and calm in the water, and I still had to hold onto the ladder to try and get on my side mount gear because the tanks were as big as me because I'm 5 foot. So I was still circling, trying to get on my side mount gear, and then we descended, and it was magical. It was unlike anything. It's quite indescribable, I think, as well. Unless you see images, it's quite hard to describe it for someone who hasn't seen images. So I will do my best. So there was one point where we were heading straight down, and you think that there's no passage or there's no way through, but you are following this tiny little line. Even as a cabin diver, you are highly aware that the entrance is now, you can't go straight up. That is the difficulty of the overhead environment. So you have to be able to manage your gas consumption and your buoyancy and the skills to know know what to do when you need to get out. And you still have this light glimmering in the back because a cabin dive is, you can't go beyond natural light. So that was okay. And so you still had, in my mind, I was okay because you still had this reference of, there's the surface, there's the way out. And then very slowly, you started to go down. And I liken this to those like fairground rides in Disneyland where you're in a mine shaft and the mine shaft pulls you down and twists and turns, and you're always aware of how narrow the roof is and how short the sides are. And so we're going down this almost roller coaster ride, as it were. You go down and you turn a corner. And at one point during these rides at Disneyland, you have this parting of the ways, as it were, where you're in the cart and there's the light at the end of the tunnel side, and then there's the side which says, danger, do not enter, and then suddenly the ride, it flips and you go down the do not enter passage, and that's when you get the twists and turns and the loops. And it made me chuckle because there was a moment where it looked exactly like that. There was a fork, and there was a line heading straight into this total abyss, total darkness, and there was a sign that read, danger, cave divers in training only, do not enter, risk of death, or something. And it just made me chuckle because it reminded me of a fairground ride in Disneyland, except this was real and it was beautiful. And so we went that way. And even just to see the formations and the stalactites on the wall and on the walls, and just knowing how precious this environment was and how privileged we were to even be able to go in there just for a minute was amazing. And even going, descending below the hillock lines and almost imagining flying over a surface of the water, but it's actually not. It's the different densities of that water, and to feel how your body changes and reacts to that environment. And it was also quite interesting because it showed me my mental limits as a diver thus far. I called that dive, actually. I was proud of myself because I called that dive, and I called it sooner into the dive than she would have expected me to. And that's because I was mentally not with it that much. I knew that my global perception had to increase before I progressed even further. But I was equally proud of myself because I recognized that in myself and called the dive, which I know we have a rule in diving where anyone can call a dive for any reason and without any repercussions, but I think it's a pride thing. We don't like to do that. And I was proud that I did, and I recognized that, and I told her that. Yeah.
Did you go back to that cave and dive some more?
We did, yes. Although it was at the very end of the training as well, and so I only have an introductory qualification into that cave diving. And it was very interesting, actually. I said to her that I will come back one day when I have improved in other aspects and continue cave diving, but not right yet. And I said to her, actually, if I were you as an instructor looking at myself, I would tell myself that I am not ready. And I would tell myself to go away and learn horizontally before we continue going vertically. And I was very good at my trim, but I would become even better. Build up that depth and quality of experience before going again, and knowing that my skills are top quality and having that mental and global perception and knowing that I can mentally deal with skills and problems that arise.
You know, my son's a diver also. And in fact, he went to school, became a commercial diver, and he and I would also talk about it is every diver's prerogative to call a dive.
Yeah.
And for many, many, many good reasons. There's a lot of divers that should have called a dive that are no longer with us. And if you're calling a dive, it's because you need to. It's a no joke sport endeavor. And for people who really don't realize it, probably the most dangerous thing you could do is cave dive. I was interviewing a mountaineer, but at one point in time, he was considering becoming a cave diver because he liked diving also. He went to Italy, and he was at some conference for cave diving, and he was rooming with one of the last famous cave divers that was invited. And after that conversation, after hearing how famous cave diver, all of his friends were dead. All of his the guys that he used to go cave diving with, because it's a no joke, highly dangerous endeavor. So you really need to know what you're doing. You got to be lucky, and you got to know when to call that dive, because something's probably telling you something's not right. So you got to listen to that. And
I think when I've told people, the types of exploration, and in terms of the types of things that one can do with diving, especially in terms of cave diving and doing some of the more dangerous aspects, it's quite very safe as long as you recognize how dangerous it is. As long as you're in tune with the protocols and having the skills. I think when most people, when I tell them talking about cave diving and technical diving and deep diving, they assume that that's what they have to be afraid of, and that's what I'm afraid of. No, because I have gone in submersibles. I've been down to 500 plus meters, and it's not scary. The scary part is understanding your mental capacity to know what to do in that situation, I think, and recognizing the limits of your mental capacity. I think that's the scary part, but that's also the exciting part, because that's what you can improve.
Now, Jennifer, you just mentioned going down in a submersible, hundreds and hundreds of feet. That's got to be a heck of an experience. And I want to ask you about that and describe that for us. But could you first describe what the submersible looks like?
Of course. So most people think that when I say submersible, they think of submarine, and they think of this giant, underwater vehicle which holds hundreds and hundreds of people, these massive things that patrol the seas. And it's not like that at all, really. So the submersible, well, this one was Triton submersibles. They kind of look like very large drones, as it were. We have a big acrylic sphere, which is a perfect sphere. And then we have the thrusters on the side, and they are all there. These ones are bright yellow. And inside we have, so you first go in through a little hatch at the top, which always makes me chuckle because it's like going through a porthole into another world, if you like. And in there, there's 3 seats, and that's it. There's 1 seat for the pilot, and all the controls are really behind and amongst her. And there are 2 seats directly beside her, and we use them, one for a media operative and one for a scientist. And there's not a lot of room in this submersible. So as someone who is around 5 foot, I was a perfect submersible candidate, because I was one of the very few people on the expedition that could stand up in the submersible. So we were in this submersible for about 8 hours each time. Or at one point, I was in there for about 12, because there was one of the frames that we used to put in the submersible in and out of the water, it broke, so we were sitting on the surface for quite a while. But yeah, it's basically a sphere, perfect sphere, and there are 3 people inside, and we are very cozy together, and that is literally it. It's just enough room, so we sit there and we can make observations and collect samples. And on the sides of the submersible and at the front of the submersible, we have lots of scientific equipment as well. So it looks a bit like a robot at the end of the day. So on one submersible, we have this arm which we can use to grab things. And there's another, on the other side, we have this massive, what looks like almost a hoover. So we have a suction sampler, which is a big hose, which we can move and collect little samples as well. And then we have jars on the side. So if you're looking, if you're sitting on the right side of the seat, and if you look out of the sphere on that side, you can see all the little jellyfish or little things that we've collected. And at our feet on the outside, there are some boxes that we have all the corals in and things like that. And on the other submersible, we have a similar setup, but we have giant cameras on so we can record things. So yeah, I would say a very long-winded answer to that is a sphere with 3 seats and what looks like a conglomerate of scientific instruments on the outside.
Take us through one of your more memorable dives in the submersible.
I would say, I think it has to be the first one, just because the excitement of that build-up was so much. And I was quite unlucky because I would say so on this expedition that we were on, it was split into 4 phases. On each of the phases, we targeted a different aspect, a different section of the Saudi Arabian Red Sea. So we went all the way from the very top to the very bottom. On only some of these different parts were submersible dives. And I was very lucky to be on different sections where we were doing submersible dives in different areas. And of course, we were rotating between all the scientists to... So each one of us would go down and do an 8-hour shift in the submersible, collect samples and come back up. And so on my day, I was all ready to go. I didn't drink anything the night before because we were literally sitting there in there for 8 hours and it was too choppy, so we didn't deploy. So the next few days I waited until the sea calmed down. I was ready to go in again. And I was so excited I could hardly contain myself. And I had made friends with a lot of the individuals who were there recording media. And so they loved photographing me, and I was always jumping up and down in their shots of the submersibles, being like, I'm about to go in there. I was very excited. And we got in and we deployed. So what happens when you deploy is that you basically get wheeled out onto the deck, and there is a giant hook which comes in the top of the submersible, and you get craned out into the water. And then there is another tender with some individuals from the crew on there, and there's one diver that jumps off the boat, swims up onto the sub, climbs up onto the sub, unhooks you, and then you can go down. We were being deployed into the water, so we had the ocean gradually begin to slosh onto the sides of the acrylic, and you kind of jump back a bit, but you are not getting wet. It's a very weird sensation, like you are in a fishbowl. And all of a sudden we stop, because one of the bolts on the A-frame, the frame which we used to crane us in, that had come out. So we couldn't deploy, so we got hoisted back up onto the deck, and I was a bit gutted. And so we couldn't do that again because the engineers were fixing the frame, and so I was waiting again and again, and it was third time lucky. So eventually the third time all went well, and I went down for the first time. And it was beautiful. I was excited, but in a similar vein to the story about breathing underwater for the first time, it felt so natural and so right that, yes, I was excited, but it wasn't this big rush of adrenaline. I was excited about what we can see, but to me, the actual feeling of the submersible felt so natural. So we got in and we started to descend. It was very, very calm, and it was really beautiful to see how the water changed. So we went from the dappling sunlight, and very quickly it became darker and darker shades of blue until around about 150, it started to become very black. And then 200, it was pitch black. And so you couldn't see anything. And all you had to orientate you with the direction was the gauges on the computer and the pilot and the sonar we used for locations. So it was all dark. And then it became light again, because all the bioluminescence started to come out. And so you would see these little creatures, and as a marine biologist, people say to me, what's that fish and what's that creature? I have no clue what these creatures were. There were so many different types, and even saw the glimmers of the lanternfish as they came down, and all these different types of gelatinous creatures as they came past. And you just saw them, and then they whisked away into the darkness. You saw all this, and then we turned the lights on. And that was crazy, because when we reached the bottom, the pilots did all their checks, and then their lights came on. And in that moment, it felt like you were on another planet, which it was a crazy feeling, because all you had was this beam of light, and it was a desolate plain. And that was it. And then, very slowly, we began moving. And we were doing transects from the bottom to the top. Transects were very loose of a word. We were basically going and seeing what we could find. So, we were going along, and there was complete darkness, and then all of a sudden we found this mound with these giant whip corals on, and all different colours, or in different shapes and sizes, or you would see a jellyfish come past. And it was just these moments of, there's life down here, and it's beautiful, and it's crazy, and it's strange, and we're so privileged to see these. And even I remember at one point during this dive, I found an octopus about 300 meters, and I spent so long trying to get it in focus with the camera, and I think about 10 seconds of a 20-minute video was in focus because I could not get the focus right because we had a moving subject and the submersible was moving as well. But anyway, we were going along and eventually we reached the wall and the side of the coral reef we were on. And just to go up that plane, just up that wall, and to have a look at either side and to see the towering topography and to realise the complexity of the ocean. And it looked as intricate and as delicate as even as a forest under the sea, as a kelp forest, as towering mountains, and to realise that the ocean holds such complexities and wonders was such a privilege to see. And I think as well on that dive, it was the first dive I saw a hammerhead shark, and so we came up from this dive, we were collecting samples, and we decided to have lunch. Having our packed lunches sitting in the submersible at 80 metres, and what came over our heads but a giant hammerhead shark. And it was crazy. It just came out of the blue and swam right over the sub, but because it's acrylic, we could see right the way up. And so we were craning our necks, having a look at this this giant shark as it came past, and I think I swore a lot as well. It was so unexpected, and it was just absolute crazy to see. And then there were so many moments like that during every submersible dive, such pinch me moments as well. And just even the conversations when you were transecting along or going up or going down, it was good 40 minutes to an hour to descend and ascend. And even just the conversations with people in the submersible with you just were amazing. And to be in that space, in that environment with individuals and having this almost aquarium-like nature of looking out and seeing these giant gorgonians or seeing mobulids at 100-metre depth was just amazing to see.
What an incredible experience.
Definitely.
Now, this may be a hard question to answer. What is the strangest thing you've ever seen out there?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I think definitely the strangest thing was... Well, it would have to be in the submersible dives, I think, as well. I think it has to be that octopus that I mentioned before. It was so unexpected, and to have it come so close to you as well was beautiful. And I think it was the nature of the unexpectedness. So I was actually filling in for one of my friends who was one of the individuals who was there to capture media. And so I was not meant to be capturing or in this particular type of submersible, but I volunteered. And so here we were, and we were going down, and I just remember trying to capture the lanternfish, which were glimmering in the beam of the submersible. And then just to see the rock that I was pointing the camera at move. And it was actually this beautiful octopus, almost translucent in its appearance. And to see it glide so slowly across the ocean floor at that depth was amazing to see. And it reminded me actually of that first time I tried to hunt for octopus in Mozambique as well. It kind of felt like a full circle moment, because I got my octopus teacher moment, as it were, because it came so close to the camera, and yet I couldn't get it in shot fully. And in a way, it was lovely to see, but it was quite nice in the fact that I didn't get it in shot as well, because I had that memory for myself. And so, yeah, I think the most unusual thing was, not unusual in the fact that it was anything like this giant translucent sea creature, but just a beautiful octopus shimmering in its colours and changing its camouflage and its formation, just sitting there. But it's also... the most unusual thing about it was also I was filming it with this giant 8K red camera sitting in a submersible about 400 metres below the surface. And it was a moment of, what am I doing here? This is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you find yourself in places and situations, and you're in the moment, and then you look around and go, oh, wow, I'm in the South China Sea. Or realization that you're in some place.
It was that
incredible.
Pinch me moment, and I think I had that pinch me moment every day on that vessel. Just, I watched again I heard about the vessel that I was on through social media and tales of other scientists and explorers, and I never thought I would actually be on there for a long time, and it was always a pinch me moment, especially watching the sunset over the helipad or doing yoga out there and having dolphins alongside the boat as well. It was just beautiful times.
Well, let me segue to other explorers. And you're what I would say is the new generation of scientists, explorer coming up. What are the challenges of your generation of explorers getting out there and seeing the world and exploring and trying to understand our planet?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I think in terms of, if you look at it holistically, I think one of the major challenges is the perception of what one can achieve or what they are capable of. I know there's a lot going on in the world right now, and I know especially with a lot of people my age or my friends or the circles that I grew up in my childhood, there was a lot of self-doubt, or people had a dream and it didn't work out, and they had a dream to become, I don't know, an archaeologist or a marine biologist or a certain type of career or what they wanted to create. And it didn't really work out for them at first, or there was a challenge in the way. And they stopped and they didn't persevere. So I think one of the most major challenges is installing the self-belief and the perseverance that young people can make it, and they can do that. When I first started and I said I wanted to be a marine biologist or a zoologist, a lot of people said to me, "Oh, I wanted to do that when I grew up, but," or "I didn't, I'm doing something else." And my question is, well, why didn't you try? And they said, well, it doesn't happen to people like me. And I said, well, I didn't think things like this happen to people like me as well, but we try and we persevere. I think that's one of the major challenges. And I also think in other terms, you have what society expects people to do, or the challenge that one has on them to be economically stable at a certain time or have completed certain milestones at a certain time. And so they think that they can't do it because they're at a certain age or they can't learn new skills. I learned to dive at 21, and it's about knowing that you're just on a different journey and having that confidence to persevere. So I think that is one of the major challenges as well. And just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean you can't be in the room as well, I think.
Believe in yourself, believe in what you want to do, and go for it.
Oh, definitely. So this was actually a funny story. So about 5 years ago, I heard of a facility that was due to be built, and it was called Blue Abyss. And it was a company that seeked to incorporate exactly what I wanted to do. A place to test submersibles, to test extreme environment, human physiology, a place to incorporate R&D, space sciences, but also marine sciences. And I thought I wanted to be a part of that. So I rang the CEO 5 years ago, and I said, "Hello, I'm a PADI advanced open water diver, and I want to be part of your team one day. I don't care how long it will take. If it's 10 years, amazing." And he, I asked him, what can I do to be, part of your team one day? And he said, well, you need to be an instructor and do X, Y, Z and have maybe some technical training, commercial training, exploration training. We want to see, a wide range of skills. I thought it's quite a lot. So 2 years after that, I emailed him and said, "You may not remember me, but I rang you 2 years ago, and this is what I've done. I'm now a dive master. I'm making groups for young scientists. I'm doing some outreach. I've set up a research station in Africa. I'm now a marine biologist." And he said, "That's amazing. Let's have a chat." A year ago, I emailed him again and I invited him out for coffee. And I said, "I've just come back from a research project." And he was very impressed. And he loved the fact that I had so many battles or failures or didn't complete a certain course, and I'm still keeping going. And I went to Antarctica a few months ago. I finally finished that research project that I was doing. 1,000 days later, I went there and I did some, not necessarily microplastic research because that grant was finished during COVID, but I still went out there and I did some megafauna research. And I remember this because I'd spent a blissful 5 days without any social media or emails. And I came back and I was in my hotel and I got an email from him and he said, we would like to invite you as an ambassador for our team. It took 5 years, but I'm there. And it just shows that perseverance can help you with that. And also the ability to recognize that you might need to learn things horizontally before going vertically. And it doesn't mean you've stopped, it just means you're acquiring other skills as well. So you can do it.
That's the best advice. You can do it.
Yeah.
So what lies ahead for you?
Well, hopefully many more expeditions. So right now, tying in everything what we probably said before. So I mentioned I was working for a scuba agency, and this agency is called Global Underwater Explorers. And I am a scholar for them. It's actually very incidentally called the Next Generation Scholar. And they give this scholar, one scholar is chosen around the world, and they give them free dive training. And incidentally, they asked me, so when are you going to do your tech diving or cave diving training? And I said, I'm not, because I want to learn horizontally. And so what I want to do instead is inspire young upcoming scientists and participate in the training related to different aspects of scientific diving. Then I want to show how even as a maybe recreational diver or young scientists, how you can get involved in scientific expeditions. And this is what I want to showcase. And so they accepted and I got picked. And this is exactly what I'm trying to do thus far. So I've actually, a few days ago, completed a photogrammetry course, so an underwater 3D modelling course. So I learned how to create 3D models, and my instructor there is a diver and explorer, and he goes off and models these caves with all these artifacts inside, and also these wrecks really deep. And I modelled a tree in a facility called Deep Dive Dubai, about 30 metres, and I was so proud of that model. And now I have that skill set and I can go and teach it to other people and show other people as well. And I am doing this dive training, so becoming scientific diving certified, and hopefully, fingers crossed, in the summer, we're going to be doing some project diving and expeditions in Italy and hopefully Polynesia, potentially with some submersibles again, and potentially helping set up a research station as well, producing some protocols for scientific diving. And I really want to help other young scientists get their foot in the door. So hopefully very soon I'm creating a legacy project, as it were, a next generation legacy project where we get, using social media, we get these communities of young divers together and be as it, teammates for expeditions, or just helping share advice. And we invite other people, other more seasoned explorers into these conversations, and hopefully we can all help each other get to where we want to be. So that is my plan. Hopefully I can come back after the summer and I maybe will have some more stories for you.
Any additional advice?
I would tell them, never give up. I would say, be honest and vocal about your weaknesses. And because if you can acknowledge your weaknesses, you know what you can improve. I would say, never underestimate the power of a simple email or DM on Instagram or any opportunity, because what's the worst that can happen? They say no. And if you don't try, you're at the same point already. And I would also say any setbacks you have is not a setback. It just means a slightly longer, winding road in your journey. Incidentally, I've had a few people ask me for advice and things. And these are all the things I've actually told people and told my friends. And I like to think that hopefully they've been inspired as well. Actually, that is a point. A few weeks ago, I was in Egypt and I was just getting back into diving again. And I posted a picture of myself on social media wearing a single tank and a wetsuit. And my dive buddies were all in doubles and a dry suit. And I received a message from somebody who said, "Oh, I wanted to dive in the dive centre you were at, but I was a bit intimidated because, I saw all over social media that they were diving doubles and dry suits and I couldn't. And so I didn't actually go and dive with them. But I saw your photo and I saw that you dove in a single tank and a dry suit then. And so I've been inspired. And so next time I will just go to them. And I said, absolutely, like, don't recognize the fact that you're in your own journey and everyone else was at that point at one time, and you're still doing amazing things. And even as a diver in a single tank in a wetsuit, you can participate in any project or anything that you can do, because as long as you help, then that is the most important thing. And knowing that if people are too scared to try, that's the worst thing. And just go out and do it. And I was quite proud of myself because I inspired somebody to go back to his center and not be intimidated by the configuration that they're wearing or their abilities thus far. And so, yeah, I would just say, own who you are and the rest will follow.
Good advice. For people who want to follow what you do, how can they do that?
Sure. So I suppose we can put any links to social media in any notes down below or something. But yes, I am most active on, I suppose, Instagram. So my Instagram is at Jen Elizabeth Thompson. And I also have a website where I put all my previous work with expeditions and also my scientific diving experience. And also I'm documenting my journey as this next generation scholar. So all of that is on there, and that is jenelizabeththompson.com as well.
All those links will be in the show notes below. And I, for one, would highly recommend people look at your Instagram because there are some great photographs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, there's one photograph, you're in a cavern, and it kind of lights up one of the formations there. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, definitely, yes. So that was, Christina. That was when I was diving with Christina, and she was motioning for me to come really close to this formation, and I was a bit scared that I was going to hit it, and then she shone the light, so it was glowing, and it was a beautiful experience. So it was a good photo. Good photo.
Yeah, a lot of good photos on that Instagram.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully, we'll get to talk with you down the road when you have some more stories to tell us. Keep inspiring those new explorers to come along. And we are going to be watching your career with a lot of anticipation.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. I came on here and I knew that the individuals that you previously interviewed or chatted to had such a wealth of experience. And I was a bit dubious about coming on because I said I didn't have as many stories, but I have some good stories thus far, and hopefully I can inspire some more, and I will definitely come back with even more.
Outstanding. All right. We'll see you down the road, and dive safe.
Thank you so much. You too.